Heart of Darkness, page 9. One more thing remained to do. Say goodbye to my excellent aunt. I found her triumphant. I had a cup of tea, the last decent cup of tea for many days, and in a drawing-room that most soothingly looked just as you would expect a lady's drawing-room to look. We had a long, quiet chat by the fireside. In the course of these confidences, it became quite plain to me I had been represented to the wife of the high dignitary, and goodness knows to how many more people besides, as an exceptional and gifted creature. A piece of good fortune for the company. A man you don't get hold of every day. Good heavens, and I was going to take care of a two-penny halfpenny river steamboat with a penny whistle attached? It appeared, however, I was also one of the workers, with a capital, you know. Something like an emissary of light, something like a lower sort of apostle. There had been a lot of such rot let loose in print and talk just about that time, and the excellent woman living right in the rush about weaning those ignorant millions from their horrid ways, till upon my word she made me quite uncomfortable. I ventured to hint that the company was run for profit. Okay, so number 15, what is the last thing that remained to do before Marlowe sets out for his new job? Say goodbye to his aunt. And why is the aunt so proud of Marlowe? Number 16, he's going to go save Africans from their ways, the ignorant millions from their horrid ways. She thinks he's out there to save them, when really he's just out there to make a buck. He ventures to say that the company's for profit. You forget, dear Charlie, that the laborer is worthy of his hire, she said brightly. It's queer how out of touch with truth women are. They live in a world of their own, and there has never been anything like it and never can be. It is too beautiful altogether, and if they were to set it up, it would go to pieces before the first sunset. Some confounded fact we as men have been living contentedly with ever since the day of creation would start up and knock the whole thing over. Excuse me. After this I got embraced, told to wear flannel, be sure to ride often, and so on, and I left. In the street, I don't know why, a queer feeling came to me that I was an impostor. Odd thing that I, who used to clear out for any part of the world at 24 hours' notice, with less thought than most men give to the crossing of a street, had a moment, I won't say of hesitation, but of startled pause before this commonplace affair. The best way I can explain it to you is by saying that for a second or two I felt as though, instead of going to the center of a continent, I were about to set off for the center of the earth. There's another good example of foreshadowing, if you didn't get the last one. I left in a French steamer, and she called in every blamed port they have out there, for as far as I could see, the sole purpose of landing soldiers and custom-house officers. I watched the coast. Watching a coast as it slips by the ship is like thinking about an enigma. There it is before you, smiling, frowning, inviting, grand, mean, insipid or savage, and always mute with an air of whispering, "Come and find out." This one was almost featureless, as if still in the making, with an aspect of monotonous grimness. The edge of a colossal jungle, so dark green as to be almost black, fringed with white surf, ran straight like a ruled line, far, far away along a blue sea whose glitter was blurred by a creeping mist. I think you need an example of imagery for your literary terms. This description of the African coast is a really good example of that, because you can see it very clearly. Can't you just picture that dark green border of trees and vegetation, and then this very narrow white strip of sand, and then the coastline. The sun was fierce. The land seemed to glisten and drip with steam. Here and there grayish-whitish specks showed up, clustered inside the white surf, with a flag flying above them perhaps. Settlements some centuries old, and still no bigger than pinheads on the untouched expanse of their background. We pounded along, stopped, landed soldiers, went on, landed custom-house clerks to levy toll in what looked like a god-forsaken wilderness, with a tin shed and a flagpole lost in it, landed more soldiers, to take care of the custom-house clerks presumably. Some, I heard, got drowned in the surf, but whether they did or not, nobody seemed particularly to care. They were just flung out there, and on we went. Every day the coast looked the same, as though we had not moved, but we passed various places, trading places, with names like Grand Bosom, Little Popo, names that seemed to belong to some sordid farce acted in front of a sinister backcloth. The idleness of a passenger, my isolation amongst all these men with whom I had no point of contact, the oily and the languid sea, the uniform somberness of the coast, seemed to keep me away from the truth of things, within the toil of a mournful and senseless delusion. The voice of the surf, heard now and then, was a positive pleasure, like the speech of a brother. It was something natural that had its reason, that had a meaning. Now and then a boat from the shore gave one a momentary contact with reality. It was paddled by blackfellows. You could see from afar the white of their eyeballs glistening. They shouted, sang, their bodies streamed with perspiration. They had faces like grotesque masks, these chaps, but they had bone, muscle, a wild vitality, an intense energy of movement that was as natural and true as the surf along their coast. They wanted no excuse for being there. They were a great comfort to look at. For a time I would feel I belonged still to a world of straightforward facts, but that feeling would not last long. Something would turn up to scare it away. Once, I remember, we came upon a man-of-war anchored off the coast. There wasn't even a shed there, and she was shelling the bush. It appears the French had one of their wars going on thereabouts. Her ensign dropped limp like a rag. The muzzles of the long 6-inch guns stuck out all over the low hull. The greasy, slimy swell swung her up lazily and let her down, swaying her thin masts. In the empty immensity of earth, sky, and water, there she was, incomprehensible, firing into a continent. Pop would go one of the 6-inch guns. A small flame would dart and vanish. A little white smoke would disappear. A tiny projectile would give a feeble screech. And nothing happened. Nothing could happen. There was a touch of insanity in the proceeding, a sense of lugubrious drollery in the sight. And it was not dissipated by somebody on board assuring me earnestly there was a camp of natives. He called them enemies, hidden out of sight somewhere. That's a good example of where the white people are just ineffective in their interactions with anything to do with Africa. Also, we read the answer to number 17. What is the first ship Marlowe takes to get to his job? It's a little French steamer, it says. So he's going up the coast, and he says, "We gave her letters. I heard the men on that lonely ship were dying of fever at the rate of 3 a day," and went on. "We called at some more places with farcical names, where the merry dance of death and trade goes on in a still and earthy atmosphere, as of an overheated catacomb. All along the formless coast, bordered by dangerous surf, as if nature herself had tried to ward off intruders, in and out of streams of death in life, whose banks were rotting into mud, whose waters, thickened with slime, invaded the contorted mangroves, that seemed to writhe at us in the extremity of an impotent despair. Nowhere did we stop long enough to get a particularized impression, but the general sense of vague and oppressive wonder grew upon me. It was like a weary pilgrimage amongst hints for nightmares. It was upward of 30 days before I saw the mouth of the big river. We were anchored off the seat of government, but my work would not begin until some 200 miles farther on. So as soon as I could, I made a start for a place 30 miles higher up. I had my passage on a little sea-going steamer. Her captain was a Swede, and knowing me for a seaman, invited me on the bridge. He was a young man, lean, fair, and morose, with lanky hair and a shuffling gait. As we left the miserable little wharf, he tossed his head contemptuously at the shore. "Been living there?" he asked. I said, "Yes." "Fine lot, these government chaps, are they not?" he went on, speaking English with great precision and considerable bitterness. "It is funny what some people will do for a few francs a month. I wonder what becomes of that kind when it goes up country." I said to him I expected to see that soon. "So!" he exclaimed. He shuffled athwart, keeping one eye ahead vigilantly. "Don't be too sure," he continued. "The other day I took up a man who hanged himself on the road. He was a Swede, too." "Hanged himself? Why, in God's name?" I cried. He kept on looking out watchfully. Who knows? The sun too much for him, or the country, perhaps. At last we opened a reach. A rocky cliff appeared, mounds of turned-up earth by the shore, houses on a hill, others with iron roofs among a waste of excavations or hanging to the declivity. The continuous noise of the rapids above hovered over this scene of inhabited devastation. A lot of people, mostly black and naked, moved about like ants. A jetty projected into the river. A blinding sunlight drowned all this at times in a sudden recrudescence of glare. "There's your company station," said the Swede, pointing to 3 wooden barrack-like structures on the rocky slope. "I will send your things up. 4 boxes, did you say? So, farewell." All right, so we answered number 18. How long does it take Marlowe to get to the mouth of the big river? 30 days. And then number 19, what is the second ship Marlowe takes to get to his job? It's a little seagoing steamer. And then number 20, to what does Marlowe compare the company's station? He compares it to like an army barracks. He calls it inhabited devastation. All right. This next part is a part I like because they talk about machinery, but he characterizes it like animals. Like he gives it animal characteristics. Listen to this paragraph. I came upon a boiler wallowing in the grass, then found a path leading up the hill. It turned aside for the boulders and also for an undersized railway truck lying there on its back with its wheels in the air. One was off. The thing looked as dead as the carcass of some animal. I came upon more pieces of decaying machinery, a stack of rusty nails. To the left, a clump of trees made a shady spot where dark things seemed to stir feebly. I blinked. The path was steep. A horn tooted to the right, and I saw the black people run. A heavy and dull detonation shook the air, and a puff of smoke came out of the cliff, and that was all. No change appeared on the face of the rock. They were building a railway. The cliff was not in the way or anything, but this objectless blasting was all the work going on. So number 21, what is being built at the station? A railway is being built, but he makes the point that they're blowing stuff up for nothing. It's more of that, the futility of the Europeans in this environment.